Now let's move on towards the next topic where we will be discussing upon the relationships between the variables. Now if you look at this same graph here, we have the category within which we have the grouped subcategory variable, and then we also have the subcategory variable here, right? Now this is where there is a relationship present amongst those variables, correct? For example, within category there are several subcategories, and within category we have several subcategories where there are certain categories which are grouped, and within those grouped categories we have several subcategories again. So in a way there is a hierarchy present between these variables. So what we are going to talk upon is how do you create hierarchies in Tableau, because establishing these relationships and hierarchies between the variables becomes especially important when you are going to use those variables quite often while building the graphs. You must have observed for multiple graphs I have used this same set of variables, right? Category, subcategory, everywhere. So it's better that I establish this relationship between them at once such that I can use that relationship going forward without having to do a manual search of variables every time. Let me show you how we can create a hierarchy, and I'll try to recreate this graph for you such that you'll be able to realize how that hierarchy has its own importance. So let me go on to the category variable as the very first thing, because that's the first level that I would want in my hierarchy. Now once I am onto the category variable, I would right click onto it and there is an option for hierarchy. If you have an existing hierarchy, you can add to it, but if you have to create a new hierarchy, you have this option of create hierarchy. Let me see the existing hierarchies that we have before we move on towards the create hierarchy. Can you observe there are two hierarchies here, location and product. Let's try to explore them as the first thing. So if you observe, this is the location hierarchy. Can you observe the icon next to it? It's a tree-like icon, which clearly is a indication that there is a hierarchy that has been created, and within that hierarchy, these are the various variables present. So the first variable in the location hierarchy is country. Within country, you have multiple regions. Within each region, there are several states. Within each of the state, there are several cities, and every city has again a postal code. So this is the kind of relationship that it has established between this set of variables. Let me pull up these variables for you and you'll be able to realize how this hierarchy works. So I tried dragging the location variable here, but can you observe the first variable within it, which was the country variable, has got populated. Now, as soon as I drag this country variable, I don't need to drag the rest of the variables manually. Of course, I can do that, but that's not needed. Because if you observe on this pill, there is a plus icon associated, which is indicating that this variable can further be drilled down to the next level in the hierarchy. So if I click on this plus icon, can you observe I'm getting regions for each of the country. So we have this 4 regions in all: central, east, south and west. And you can see for Canada there is only central, east and west. So only those 3 categories have populated. And for United States, all the 4 regions. Now you also see a plus icon associated with the region variable. So if you click on that, you can see it is further including the state variable for us, where you can see the several states associated with each of the region. Within the states, you further have the cities, and for the cities, you again have the postal codes, correct? So this is how you can simply perform a drill down and even a roll up operation, because there is a hierarchy associated with this set of variables. Currently, we have drill down. And you can see postal code is the last variable present in this hierarchy. So there is no plus or minus sign associated with it, right? But now, after drilling down to the most granular level, If I decide at the runtime while presenting that, let's say I don't want to talk about the city-wise information, I can roll up to the previous level also. So you can roll up to whichever level you want. Let's say I click on city, you can see the postal code has gone away. If I roll up to the state level or to the region level, you will see that would be the information that it would consider for building the view. So the data would still remain the same, but you are just deciding the level of hierarchy at which you want to present the data. So this was a kind of inbuilt hierarchy that Tableau had created into this sample superstore related database. Similarly, you can also see there is a product hierarchy also present here, which Tableau has created for us, where there are only manufacturer and product name. But ideally we have a lot of variables related to product, right? Like the category or the subcategory that we were looking at, they were all product related categories only. So if I want to, let's say, recreate this hierarchy, I'll first have to remove this hierarchy. Okay. So how do you remove the hierarchy? Just right click on it and you get an option to remove hierarchy. Alright. So now that the hierarchy has been removed, you can see the variables which were a part of that hierarchy, which is the manufacturer and the product name, are now available as individual variables in this data. Now what I need to do is create a fresh hierarchy. And whenever you create a fresh hierarchy, always start with the highest level in that hierarchy, which is in our case the category variable, right? So let me right click onto the category variable and go to the hierarchy option to create hierarchy. As soon as I click on that, you can see it is prompting me to enter a hierarchy name. Let me name it as products. As soon as I hit enter, can you observe the products hierarchy has got created, within which there is only category variable which is residing right now. Now I can further add more variables under this hierarchy. Within the category, I would like to have the subcategory. So there are two ways in which we can add more variables into a hierarchy. Either you go to this right click option, go to the hierarchy and go to add to hierarchy, select the hierarchy in which you need to add it. So let's say, for example, if I'm selecting products here, can you observe the subcategory variable got added below the category? So this is one of the way using which you can add more variables. But the simplest way is to drag and drop. You can simply drag and place the variables in the order in which you want them in the hierarchy. Let's say, for example, I want after subcategory, let me select the manufacturer. For every subcategory, there were different manufacturers. So I can drag and drop the manufacturer. Now, when I do this, can you observe there is a black horizontal line appearing? This is where it is indicating me where I am going to place the manufacturer. Do I need it below the subcategory or do I need it above the subcategory? Based on that, I can drop the variable. So only drop it when you are at the right position in the hierarchy. I want it below the subcategory, so I am dropping it over there and you can see it got added. Now, after manufacturer, let me think of which is the next level that can be used. Every manufacturer is producing certain products. So let me drag the product and let me drop it below the manufacturer. So product name, and I also saw product ID. So let me drag that as well and drop it below the product name. Alright. So this is the products hierarchy that we have created. We also have the grouped subcategory variable, which we can definitely add. But let's think of where to add it and then we will do that change. For now, our products hierarchy is ready, consists of 5 variables here. So let's at least try to look at where are these variables going to be placed. So let me remove these variables which we had temporarily taken on the sheet and let me drag the products variable. Now as soon as I drag the products hierarchy, did you observe? The first level in that hierarchy has got populated, which is category. If I drill it down, I get the subcategory. If I drill it down further, I get to see which are the manufacturers associated with each of the subcategory. And if I drill down further, I get to see the product names that were manufactured by each of the manufacturer. Every product name also has a product ID associated, and this is the last level in the hierarchy. So this is where we have created a hierarchy which we can now easily use in order to perform the drill down and the roll up kind of operations. Suppose at the runtime, if I decide that I don't want to include the details, very granular details like product name or product ID, I can roll it up to the subcategory level as well. And this is where I only get to see the category and the subcategory of the products. So it is up to us to decide what should be the level in the hierarchy that we want to maintain while displaying that visual. Now that we have observed how to create hierarchies in Tableau, we can now maybe try to complete this graph. So currently we have the category and the subcategory present in this. Let's try to add up a numerical column so that this graph looks complete. So let me drag either maybe sales or profit, anything that you wish, and yeah, this is the graph that we have got. In case you want to color it on the basis of category, let's do that. Okay, now with respect to colors, there's one thing that I would like to discuss, that you have multiple options to color, right? Like you have category also, you have subcategory also included into this graph. So which would be the ideal variable to color? So let's say if you try to color it on the basis of subcategory, you will get different color shades for the different bars that you have, right? But is this really adding any value to the graph? The answer is no. So that is where this is one point that I want you to understand, that as a best practice of visualization, try to customize your graph in such a way that it adds some value or meaning to the graph. So instead of this subcategory, let me just remove this effect. Instead of this subcategory, it's better if I color it on the basis of category, because then you can clearly see that there are blue bars representing one of the category, red bars representing office supplies, and similarly the green bars, right? And that makes some meaning. So this is something that you should always remember whenever you are trying to customize any of your graphs. Now that the graph is complete, where we are trying to look at category and subcategory wise sales, we can make sense out of this. But do you remember the subcategory grouped variable that we had created? We can add this variable also to the hierarchy, right? Because it's a variable. So we can include this as well into the products hierarchy. And the question now is, where should I include it? Above or below the subcategory? So let's say, for example, I try to drag this subcategory and place it below the actual subcategory variable. I can try to drill down and see what is the effect. Is it the effect that we wanted? No. So what has happened currently is, envelopes, fasteners and labels were actually considered as individual categories because of the actual variable. And now that we have included subcategory grouped variable below that, you can see those three items are represented as stationery items, stationery items, stationery items. But those three bars did not get combined into a single one, right? So this does not meet our purpose. So what I want you to realize is, placement of that grouped variable is very, very important in the hierarchy in order to represent the correct flow of values. So the ideal position for this grouped variable is above the subcategory and not below. So let me drag and adjust this. And now let me try to drill it down again. So category getting drilled down into the grouped variable. And yes, this is where we see the stationery items is represented as a single bar. Now if I further want to see what are the subcategories, you can see stationery items is further drilled down into arts, envelopes, fasteners and labels. So this is the right flow of the hierarchy. So hierarchy is not just storing variables together at a single position. Of course, it gives you that ease of accessing the variables because you have kept all the related variables together. But more than that, it is the relationship between the variables that gets established in a better manner so that you can use it easily while performing those drill down and roll up kind of operations. So this is something that I wanted to discuss in terms of the hierarchies. or user-defined hierarchies that you can create using Tableau. And the reason why I use the word user-defined is because Tableau also provides some inbuilt hierarchies to you. And the next thing that I'm going to show you is which is the inbuilt hierarchy that Tableau offers you. So let me go on to a fresh sheet again and let me try showing you another visual where I want to, let me try showing you another visual where I want to show you something related to the date values. So let's say I want to see how are my sales fluctuating over the period of time. That's where I'm going to consider the order date variable. We had these two variables, order date and ship date, but ideally order date is when the sales actually happen. Ship date is only when the product is shipped. So let me take the order date into consideration. Now, as soon as I drag the order date variable, did you observe that it is aggregating it to the yearly aggregation level? Order date in our data was present in the form of day-wise date. Can you observe here? 3rd of January, 4th of January, and so on and so forth. But as soon as I pulled it up as a variable in the rows, you can see it has aggregated it to the yearly level. And this is where you can see we had the data for 2021, 22, 23 and 24. So this is where Tableau integrates an inbuilt hierarchy within the date variables that you have in your data. And the default level of these hierarchies is year. If you drill it down further, you get the quarter. If you drill it down further, quarter gets drilled down to month, and month further gets drilled down to the day level. So you can see only those values at the day level which are actually present in your data. For example, if you go to the data source, can you observe there was no 1st or 2nd Jan entry that we had for the year 2021. So your actual values of the day variable also are starting from 3rd onwards. Only those values which are present in the data are present here. For example, there is no entry for 8th of January, so you can see that date has been skipped. So this is the kind of inbuilt hierarchy that Tableau associates with all of your date related variables. So you can easily perform this drill down and roll up kind of operations at the runtime and show your data more meaningfully. Because even Tableau knows that you may usually not be interested in looking at day-wise data. So that is where your other aggregations like quarter or monthly level will help you to analyze the data more meaningfully. So let's say, for example, I want to see quarterly sales that has been done by the superstore. Let me drag the sales variable and put it onto columns. So this is where you can see this is the kind of line graph that has got populated. We did not explore the line graph before, right? Line graph is ideally suitable when you are looking at the numerical variable over a period of time. Sales is a continuous numerical variable and year and quarter are related to the dates, right? So over the period of time, how are my sales fluctuating is what I'm trying to see with the help of this line graph. But then if you look at this graph currently, it looks like my sales are declining, correct? It's a decreasing order that we see in the sales. But that's not the true case, okay? So what has happened here is, if you observe, my date related variables, the year and the quarter, are on the y-axis, whereas the sales is on the x-axis. Ideally, when you look at the line graph, your x-axis shows the date and the y-axis shows the actual variable that you're looking at. So let's try to transpose this graph where I'll just switch the axis. So we have this transpose button on the toolbar that allows us to swap the rows and columns. Let's use that and you will see the real picture in front of you. So now can you observe the graph has changed its look and feel, where on the x-axis there are two variables. One is the year, where you can see it has taken it on the top, and based on that it has divided the graph into panes. And within each of the pane you have the quarters, where quarter 1 to quarter 4 is being displayed. And on the y-axis we now have the sales variable. So now that we look at the graph meaningfully, we can realize that the sales are usually less in the quarter 1 and they tend to increase by the quarter 4. This is where we have divided this graph yearly basis. But there are different types of line graphs that are available which can be applied here. The current one which it has used for us as a default one is the discrete lines, where, as I said, it has divided my data on a yearly basis and then tried to plot those lines. But if you want a continuous kind of a line graph, this is the option that you can choose, and the same data is now being represented as a continuous line. You can see the ups and downs that we have in this data, where it is clearly visible that there is a yearly kind of a pattern that we can observe over here in the data, right? Our sales are initially on the lower side, but they increase by the end of the year is the kind of scenario across each of the years that we are looking at right now. And we have this data for a duration of how many? 4 years. And you can see on an overall basis that sales have only gone on increasing. So compared to 2021, we have much higher sales in the year 2024. That sounds like a good thing, right, for the superstore. So this is where we have tried creating a line graph, the pane-wise line graph as well as the continuous line graph. And let me show you that apart from these default level of aggregations, the year, quarter, month and day that we saw when it comes to the date related variables, there are other aggregations also that you can use. So if you see here, as soon as I clicked on this down button, there are various aggregations that are available. Okay, so if you see, you're currently looking at quarterly data, but if you want to further drill down, you can also choose a monthly kind of data and you can see the monthly values are being shown. If you decide to choose any other level, let's say weekly basis, you want to see what are the sales and how they are fluctuating, you can easily do that by just a single click. That's the best thing of Tableau, right? Just a single click and you're able to make a lot of changes in the overall visualizations that you are building. So this is how you can select the aggregation, and based on that you can try to visualize the data. Now this is where it was a single variable, right? We were trying to look at the quarterly sales. Let me go back to the original graph that we had built. Quarterly sales at a continuous pace is what we are looking at. If I switch it to the discrete view, this is where the hierarchy was being used, right? And now let's say, apart from the year and the quarter, if let's say instead of quarter, I want month, I don't want quarter, I can do that. So now can you observe yearly basis? These are the values that I get to see for the various months. Although it has taken alternate values on the x-axis because there is lesser space available. But let me try fitting it to the entire view, and yes, you should be able to see all the months related values on the labels now. So 12 months, 12 values is what you see over here on the x-axis, and this is the pane-wise divided graph on a yearly basis that we get to see. So it's up to us to decide the aggregation measure while we build the graph. But the default order that it always follows is year, then quarter, then month, and then the day. So this is how a line graph can be built. Now just to add a little bit of variation into this, let me tell you that currently this is a single line which is representing the overall sales that the superstore is doing. But what if I want to further bifurcate it on the basis of the category of products? So I want a different line for the furniture, I want a different line for the office supplies, and a third line for the technology related sales. In this case, all we need to do is drag and drop the category variable onto color. And can you observe? Now there are 3 different lines, each showing a different color that we have got here, where you can see the blue line represents the furniture sales, the red one indicates the office supply sales, and the green one talks about the technology related sales. So it's up to us to decide how and what customization we would like to add into this. Not just that, you can also label the graph, right? And while it comes to labels, if you select this show mark labels, it will show you each and every value because the marks to label has been set to all. But you can also take line ends such that you will be able to see only the first and the last value in each and every pane. So at the start of the year, what was the value, and at the end of the year, what was the value? That is what you'll get to see when you are setting this line ends option. Apart from that, you can also choose the size of these lines, how bold you want to display them. So you can adjust the bar over here and you'll be able to see that more meaningfully. And apart from this, you can also adjust the tooltip. We have already seen all of these options on the marks card, so I'm not reiterating on them. But this is where the inbuilt hierarchy that Tableau builds for you can be used when you're looking at the date related variables and building line graphs or any other kind of graphs on them. Let me also show you within this same graph. Let me just change this to the area graph. The area chart kind of tells you the similar thing, but it stacks one category above the other. So let's say, for example, the green color is for the technology. Over that, it has stacked the office supplies. And on top of that, what we have is the furniture. So this is where the total sales is again seen, but we have divided that entire area into the three components based on the categories. So it's up to us to decide whether the line graph or whether the area graph is more suitable or applicable to our data, and we can choose it accordingly. But all in all, these line graphs are a very useful technique in order to visualize the data over a large span of time, typically useful in the time series kind of domains. So where you have to see the overall revenue of the company for the past 5 years, or where you're looking at stock prices fluctuating on a daily basis, line graphs are the most useful thing. Retake लेते हो. So now that we have seen how line charts can be created and customized as per our requirements, let's try to see something more. You must have seen those visualizations where over the period of time we see those values fluctuating, right? And when I talk about the values fluctuating, I'm talking about the graph changing. So I'm talking about adding the motion into the graphs. I'm sure you must have seen those population related graphs, or maybe in the COVID scenario, you must have observed how the number of cases were fluctuating on a daily or a weekly basis. So if you want to add that kind of interactivity into Tableau while you generate those graphs which are based on a timeline, we have the pages card which can be used for that. So I'm going to show you one example where we will introduce a motion into the graph with the help of the pages card. So let's say, for example, I am trying to create a new graph where I'm trying to show the state-wise sales. So I'm purposely picking up the state-wise sales because I wanted to show it to you on a map-related graph. So let's say I select the filled map over here, and we observe that there are these several states present here. Let me label them in order to make them more readable. Yeah, this looks good. And let me also drag the state name onto the label so as to make it even more readable. Okay, so let me drag the sales also onto the labels, and yeah, this is the kind of graph that we have created here, right, where we can see California is the state which gives us the maximum sales, and yes, accordingly the rest of the states. Now over here in this graph, this is showing me the entire data together, right? As in from the year 2021 till the year 2024, whatever total revenue was generated by the superstore, based on that, these values have been populated. But what if I want to bring in that motion into this graph, which tells me about, how are the values changing with respect to 21, 22, 23 and 24. So in that case, what we can do is we can drag and add a date variable into the pages card. That will allow us to bring in that motion. So we are setting a timeline over here into the pages card, and this is where you will be able to see certain options getting populated here. So if you observe this, what you see over here is the default aggregation that has been applied onto the order date is what is being populated here. Given that we had 4 years of data, 2021, 22, 23 and 24 are the 4 years of options that we see here, along with the slider present here. which will allow you to adjust the slider in order to change the values. Let's say 22, 23 and 24. Those are the 4 values that this will take. But now what is the real purpose of this slider? So you have this play button over here which will allow you to play forward, and you also have a button to play backwards. There is a stop button here. So now once you click on this play button, you will observe that you will start from the year 2021 and move on to 22, 23 and 24. So can you observe the values that you see over here are changing because now you are trying to represent the data at a yearly level. So I just want you to observe that when you did not use the pages card in order to set this effect, the total sales that was contributed by California was $6,71,595, right? But as soon as I tried dividing that data at a yearly basis, I want you to observe that the values are changing. So currently if you see, the order date is belonging to 2024. And the sales value is not 6 lakhs, but it is $2,54,914, correct? So it's not representing the entire data as of now, it is just showing for one particular year. So as soon as I again hit the play button, you will see that the values will fluctuate, showing you the values for individual years. This is how you get motion into the graph. And having said that, let me also show you that there are certain options which are available to adjust the speed of this motion. So let's say the first button over here is going to set a slow speed. So if I again try to play this, you'll observe that it is changing the graph, but at a very slow pace. The middle button here is for the normal pace, and this one is for a faster pace. So let me change it to faster pace. And this is the change that you should be able to see. Let me just play it once again so that you are able to see. This is quite fast, right? I usually prefer the normal option here. So this is how you can bring in the motion. But now, what if I don't want to show this change in the values on a yearly basis? What if I want to do it at a quarterly basis? Of course, you know how to change the aggregation now, right? So from here, I can just go and change the year to quarter. But when I do that, what will happen is, I'll just do that and I'll show you the result. So what you get to see over here is simply Q1, Q2, Q3 and Q4. Now in this case, what will happen is, it will concatenate the values for all the quarter ones of the 4 years and then show you the total value in the quarter one. Similarly, quarter 2 for all the 4 years will be summed up, and that will be the total value that you see for the quarter 2, and so on and so forth. But ideally, that's not the thing that you would usually want to see, right? You would like to see something where you are first looking at 2021, and within that you are distributing the values in the 4 quarters. Then moving on to 2022 and then looking at the 4 quarters, correct? So in case you want to bring in that kind of a effect, what you need to ensure is the first level that you are adding into the pages card should be for the year. And then you can again drag the order date variable and carefully place it below the year. So order date, now when placed below the year variable, can you see it is aggregating to the quarterly level, which is the next level in the hierarchy that it automatically creates, correct? So now if you observe, this drop down box will reflect the correct values. So 2021 is the year, and you'll get to see quarter 1, then quarter 2, then quarter 3 and quarter 4 for the same year. Then you move on towards the next year and go through the rest of the quarters, right? What will happen if I do it vice versa? What if I put the quarter variable above the year variable? Let me do it once again. So suppose, so quarter variable and then the year variable. In this case, what will happen is, you will show the quarter 1 values for all the 4 years first, then move on to the quarter 2 values of all the 4 years, and then so on and so forth. This usually does not look very nice. So let me drag that quarter below the year such that I get the kind of data that I would ideally like to show. So now when I click on this play button, you will see that the values will change over the period of time. So this is a very effective visualization when you want to show those values changing over a particular timeline. And you must have, as I said, definitely gone through such kind of graphs where people were trying to show the number of cases or the number of deaths that were happening during the COVID period. So this is how you can do that same kind of thing in Tableau with the help of the Pages card.
Like this video, subscribe to our channel and comment on the concept you want to learn next.